Welcome back to the Strategic Veteran. I'm your host, Adam Peters, and this is where we explore stories of resilience, transformation, and growth from veterans and those who honor their sacrifices. Today, we have a truly special guest with us, a man whose work brings to life courage and spirit of those who have served. Joining us is Doyle Glass, an acclaimed author, historian, and sculptor whose dedication to preserving the legacies of real life heroes is nothing short of inspiring. Doyle's latest book, The Swift Sword, The True Story of Marines and Mike 3-5 in Vietnam, 4 September 1967, takes us deep into one of the Vietnam War's most harrowing battles. It vividly captures not just the events, but also the resilience and brotherhood of the Marines involved. But Doyle's impact doesn't stop at the page. His artistry shines through the incredible Medal of Honor memorials he's created in Kentucky and Texas, standing as timeless tributes to America's bravest and their services. With a rare ability to bridge history, storytelling, and art, Doyle brings unparalleled depth and perspective to conversations about sacrifice, service, and what it means to truly honor those who've shaped our world. Today, he'll share insights not only into his stories, but also into the importance of preserving history, the creative process behind his monuments, and the essential values of resilience and growth. So whether you're a veteran navigating your own journey, someone passionate about history, or simply looking for inspiration, stay tuned. Doyle's wisdom and heartfelt stories are sure to resonate deeply. Let's dive in. Doyle, welcome to the show, man.
Man, Adam, what an introduction. Thank you very much. I greatly appreciate it. I'm humbled to be
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, man. I really appreciate you reaching out. I wanted to come on and talk veteran advocacy and history and all the ways that you're kind of commemorating the service that those of us who decided to serve. So let's jump right in, man. First question is a little different for you because you're not a veteran. We talked about this offline, but where did you grow up and what inspired you to do the work that you're doing?
I grew up in Midland, Texas, and I was inspired. I guess my first spark came as a young kid, say early 70s, age 10 or so, visiting the Alamo. And when you visited the Alamo back then, it's been a while since I've been there. There was a plaque in front of the chapel that said, "Keep your voices low. Heroes died for you here." Something to that effect. So immediately awe inspired, walked in, and if you're a student of history, you know about Travis's letter on February 24th asking for aid, victory, or death. Uh, Basically saying, I am determined to die like a soldier if this call is neglected, who knows what is due to his own honor and that of his country. So when you walk in, I read that as a 10 or 11-year-old, and I said, what is this? Who are these great people that allowed me to live the life I have, the comfortable life I have, way back in 1836. So I dived into books about the Alamo and the characters, and that sparked just a long-term love of history, of heroic stories, but also a profound appreciation for those who put their life on the line so that I personally can live my comfortable life, drink my coffee, and talk to you in the morning about people that have done what I have not done. I'm not a veteran. Uh, I honor veterans because I profoundly wake up every morning. Wow, I live in America and I'm free because people have put their life on the lines and have died for me. So that's where the spark came from, a lifelong love of history. And then I realized that there are other stories just as inspiring as the Alamo out there. We have to get them out there. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
that
there's
background.
it's so funny we're having this conversation. You're from Midland, Texas. I just started Landman on Paramount Plus. I don't know if you've watched that yet or not. What a great show that is! Let me ask, is Midland really like that as an oil town?
It's an oil town, no doubt, but I've watched the first couple of episodes. It's pretty stereotypical. They really kind of hit on the hats and all of that. But there's an element of truth. It is, they had the man camps, where the oil field
Yeah.
workers live. That's all true. I mean, those guys are there. So there are some, like any kind of stereotype, I guess, there are elements of truth in it. Um, I was a little put off by some of that, but overall, it's a fine show.
I think
It's
it's a great. I just love Billy Bob. He's
yeah,
hilarious to me. It just the way his demeanor. I think they casted the characters right and all of that. Anyway, I digress. That's not what we're here to talk about.
no,
Let's
Billy Bob's awesome.
yeah.
You are right. I love his character and yeah, and the way he talks about and brings up some political issues and all that. I like his character a lot. I agree with you.
Yeah. So the Alamo was really the jumping off point for you. Would you say that was kind of your biggest I don't know, revelation into love of history, or were you kind of ingrained in history before you went to the Alamo at 10 years old?
Well, that sparked it because I just didn't know. I mean, of course, you learn some of these things in school, but just visiting and seeing and looking at the artifacts, that really kind of sparked it. And then, just growing older, I remember getting the old Time Life series, The Old West. They would send you a book once every 2 months, and they had the gunfighters and the Texans and the women and the soldiers. So that just kind of kept it going. And growing up, I also grew up hearing about the Vietnam War. I was too young to serve, but I would see it. Every night the evening news, Walter Cronkite would talk about Vietnam. He, had the map up, and so I heard about that, and I listened, and I had heard stories about World War II, the Battle of the Bulge and Pearl Harbor, and I said, okay, well these guys who are older than me. I mean, I look up to them, are out there fighting. What's that all about? Then as I grew older, and the war came to an end, and I saw that those guys weren't treated well, that they weren't given the homecoming they deserved. And in fact, in many cases, they were treated very poorly. Tomatoes thrown at them, spat on, called baby killers, all of that. Then just kind of shuttled off and forgotten. And I kind of went, wow, okay, this is interesting. This is not how we treated our greatest generation. I grew up on these stories, once again, like the Alamo. So got something different happening here. But anyway, the love of history continued. I went to college and decided to get a history degree. I knew I wanted to go to law school, and I knew that if I studied something I was passionate about, my grades would be better. So
Right? It's funny how that works.
yeah, funny how that works. So that's what I did. That's exactly what I did. Got a history degree and went to law school and was a prosecuting attorney for over a decade. And then, but the history was always there, always reading nonfiction about historical people. And then just to get into Vietnam, I kind of realized with the monuments, I created the 2 monuments, and that was incredible. The stories of those 2 individuals, and in Kentucky, John Squires, a young 18-year-old who fought at Anzio, was killed at Anzio, earned the Medal of Honor. And then in Texas, from Midland, my hometown, George O'Brien, who earned the Medal of Honor as a second lieutenant in Korea at the Hook. Those stories were very inspiring. But then I had the epiphany, you can't sculpt every story, first
No.
off.
Right.
And especially with regard to the Vietnam War, there are no stories. There are just a few. You have movies that kind of put a political bent on that conflict, like Platoon and The Deer Hunter, which,
Yeah.
they're fine. That's fine. But where is the story from the guys themselves? Where is the story from the grunt on the ground? And once I kind of had that epiphany that was kind of my mission, to tell that Vietnam veteran history, that was kind of my launching point for both books. Lions of Medina, I wrote first, and then Swift Sword second.
And like, how did you fall into all of that? You just like you found, like, you start doing this research, right? Because you're inspired, your love of history, wanting to tell these guys stories. And I agree with you. Vietnam, there's not a lot of good stories that come out of that. I think one of the best books I've read about Vietnam is Blood on the Risers. That's a really good one. But like like you pointed out, Deer Hunter, Apocalypse Now, all those movies put their political spin on it. Marlon Brando and all that bullshit. Like, you actually did something of substance, right? Like, you went and created these monuments for these World War II winners, and then you realized there's other stories that need to be told. So how did you latch on to, let's say, your first book, and then we'll get to the second book? How do you find these stories to tell, and what is that process like?
Well, it was surprisingly easy initially. I sent some emails out. This was back, say, 2002. And I contacted a veteran who lived in Bowling Green, Kentucky. At the time, I was living in Louisville, Kentucky. So it's maybe an hour and a half away. It's not far. And I said, I want to write a book, want to get a true story. And he said, I've got one for you, because I was there. And he, in one email, explained how on Operation Medina, his company was surrounded. And it was eerie because it sounded like the Alamo. I mean, it was overwhelming numbers, perimeter surrounded, ambushed. All the elements were there. So I kind of went, are you kidding me? We have an Alamo here in Vietnam. I didn't know any of this. So that started with that veteran. Since a lot of these guys have passed away.
Yeah.
Cancer has taken a lot of them. They walked through Agent Orange on patrol. And this is one of the guys who's passed away. But I remember going out to his house in Bowling Green, and he gave me some moonshine and some beans. And as I'm sipping moonshine and beans at, 12 in the middle of the afternoon, I was off work that day. He starts telling me the story and who I should contact. So his name was Rowdy Yates, and he got me in contact with Jack Ruffer, who's also passed away, who was a retired Marine Corps major. And it went from there, basically starting with those guys. Here's the list of the guys you need to talk to. And I would simply be very diligent. Back then, I had a cassette recorder hooked up to my phone, cassette tape, clip it in. I'm recording you. Is that okay? Yes, it is. I'm recording now, and record a cassette tape. So I had at the end, after several years, couple of years, this process took place. I had basically a shoebox full of cassette tapes, took them to a court transcriber, had transcripts made. So, I would have the permanent record, and it went from there. But the key thing with both of these books, and you've already touched on it, is that there's no other historical record. It's almost exclusively, in fact, I would say 99.9% in both cases.
It's word of mouth.
Oral history from these guys, which also brought another epiphany, meaning if I don't get these stories down, they're gone.
Well, and to your point, Doyle, that's a really good point. I think, it's already been 10 years since I've been out of the Army in 2015, and kind of in 2015 is really when GWOT really started to wind down, if you will. I know 2021 would be the disastrous pullout of Afghanistan and all of that, but like, as far as the op tempo and deployments every other year and all of that, it's been a decade since we've been operating at that. And like, so that means my generation is now, we're the crusty old guys, right? Like, I'll be 40 this year, but that makes me the crusty guy, right? Like, so we forget, and we're really starting to forget, like, the Desert Storm guys are starting to, they're hitting retirement age now, right? Like, they're getting up there. And, I have family. I have an uncle who's in his 80s. He's a Vietnam guy, went twice as an 11 Charlie. He's not in very good health because of all the reasons we've already talked about. And I don't think I've ever heard a story out of his mouth. The only thing I actually ever heard out of his mouth was he was so jaded with the Army and hated it so much. When I joined, he told me I was making the biggest mistake I'd ever made in my entire life. Obviously, that caused some problems. We don't speak anymore, but the Vietnam generation, they're quickly falling off the face of the planet, and it's really hard to wrap your head around that when it's I mean, there's still a couple, I think, of World War II guys still alive. Maybe. I don't know if that's true in 2025 right now, but just a couple of years ago, there was still a few of those guys left. So, I think it's important what you're doing. Is there any particular reason why you latched onto Vietnam? Is it because the stories haven't been told, because there's no written record, or is it just kind of that's just where you landed and you just ran with it?
Well, it started with my observations of what was happening, as a kid and then as a teenager. Then my own, what's the word I'm looking for? Disappointment, even as a teen, in how these guys were being treated, compiled with then a political spin being put on by certain individuals of how they viewed all of this, which is their viewpoint, which they have a right to express that. And I just kind of felt, and then the whole idea, well, let's just forget it and move on. We're going to celebrate the greatest generation, as we should. In the 90s and the early 2000s, we were doing that. If you watch Band of Brothers, the HBO miniseries, it starts with interviews of those guys, the actual veterans. They're all gone. They're all gone.
Yeah.
They're all gone. And that was incredibly moving. And as I was watching that back in early 2000, maybe late 90s, I can't remember, I said, are we going to do this for our Vietnam guys? Or is it continue just kind of, whatever, forget it. Vietnam, Korea, what? Afghanistan, it's all running together. And I said, okay. So I realized that it was just my mission because of my time in life, what I had observed, God puts you in certain places and in certain time. This was my time.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it makes perfect sense what you're saying. It's like you were largely affected by this as a kid. You've seen these guys coming home, getting spit on, tomatoes thrown at them, treated like absolute dog shit for serving their country. So it makes sense that you would fall into it. It was just my own curiosity is why I asked, because I love history too. I'm not going to claim to be a history buff like you are, but my love of history kind of stopped at, I'd say, the Crusades. That's kind of when I kind of felt like I just like older history for whatever reason. My favorite period of time is ancient Egypt. I think there's so much shit we don't even know about ancient Egypt still, and some things that maybe historians are lying to us about. But U.S. history really never fascinated me. And since we've been talking, you've already drawn some parallels, right? So, the Alamo in the 1800s, and then you're looking at Vietnam again, and the stories that you're telling from Vietnam and how closely related they are to the Alamo. And then we can fast forward to the global war on terror and 2013. If you know what I'm talking about Benghazi, would be another kind of Alamo type situation. So I think this is an awesome segue into what are the lessons that you're learning, and what are the stories that you're hearing from these veterans that you're writing these books about? Because I don't think there's a lot of perspective of the warfighter being told about Vietnam, and I'm sure you've got quite a bit of perspective that's not out there yet, and I think it needs to get out there.
Yeah, and that's man, and I want to applaud you for what you're doing and getting the word out with your podcast, because for me, I can write a book and sit in my office, but if nobody reads it or hears about it or knows about it, what good is that doing anyone? So I want to thank you for what you're doing to get the word out. First off, my first observation is that you mentioned the ancients and the classics, is that these stories are almost on a 2,000-year continuum, meaning you think about the Battle of Thermopylae. I may not be pronouncing it right. Well, people compare that to the Alamo. Well, that was how many thousands of years ago, the Spartans versus, I guess, the Persians. So there's a continuum here. There is a theme that can go thousands of years of heroic action, stoicism, fighting for something bigger than yourself. So that was one observation. And you mentioned Vietnam, why I got involved with it. the other point is that these stories are incredible. Once I dove into it, I said, this is an incredible story that's not known. So that also hooked me. So that was the first thing. The second thing would be faith and spirituality comes out very strongly in different ways. You know, the old adage, there is no atheist in a foxhole, is kind of true from what I've read. And this is coming from the guys that are telling me what they experienced, not
I'll
me.
tell you, it's 100% true. There is no atheist in a foxhole, and largely when shit goes down, the last thing you'll hear people say is, "Oh God
Right.
help me." It's fascinating, and and I could say that as somebody who was pretty agnostic about religion and God and spirituality and all of that when I was serving, when I was in the fight too. You kind of question those things. You have that spiritual battle, but when it comes down to it, like that's the first person you're going to when you're in trouble. It's like, God help me. So good for you for recognizing that, because it really is true.
Well, once again, my goal repeatedly, I'm not a veteran. I've never seen combat. I'm not even going to pretend to know what that's like. And the first, when I start trying to lecture on what combat is like, then something's wrong. I've never seen it. Okay. I've been comfortable my whole life. I've been very grateful for that. So, having said that, what I can say is that this is what I was told. This is the story that was related to me. I truly 100% believe it from the guys that did see combat.
Yeah.
And that spiritual element, there is one instance in Swift Sword where a young man under intense combat, basically he's starting to be overrun, turns his head up to the sky and has a vision of God. I put his words, what he saw. We also have Father Vincent Capodanno, who was a Navy chaplain, who was a stowaway on this battle and performed last rites, aided the corpsmen through all of this. So once again, that spiritual element. The other element is the camaraderie between these guys. These guys are fighting for each other. They're fighting. I'll save your life if you save mine. That brotherhood, that bond is awe-inspiring, something that I have not experienced. I went back to Vietnam with some of these veterans in 2009. We actually found the battlefield where Operation Swift was fought on that first day. And seeing that camaraderie and brotherhood was amazing. I felt quite the outsider, the observer, but it was very awe-inspiring to see that brotherhood of those guys who went through the crucible of combat. So those are just some general observations from a tactical and strategic viewpoint. Both books point out the mistakes that were made in Vietnam, what we don't need to do on a tactical and a strategic level. I think that you would know better than me, of course, but I think that our armed forces have learned some key lessons from that conflict. The individual replacement system, for example, didn't work in Vietnam. It was pretty much a major negative. Equipment, the M16 kept jamming and failing. It cost a number of lives. These guys were ramming cleaning rods down the barrel of the rifle like they're fighting the Revolutionary War. How did it come that they were equipped with defective equipment? Be better to go get an AK-47 from a VC.
Yeah.
So
early technology during the Vietnam War. I mean, that platform is a phenomenal platform right now. Often when given the choice, I would take that platform,
right.
10 times out of 10, but I have so much time with that platform. You know what I mean? So it's also very different. We're on, probably a 6 different generation of that rifle, now. Sure. And something I'm kind of curious. I don't know. Did you ever you said you went back to this battlefield in 2009, writing this book, and I have an experience coming home. I did 4 deployments. So I did 3 to Iraq, 1 to Afghanistan, just for your situational awareness. And and I can't remember which one, but I'd come home from one of them. And obviously we've already hit on, the Vietnam vets that came home, they came home a very different way than anything that I ever experienced. Everything that I experienced, from coming home on R&R to coming home from the end of the deployment, there was people lining the airport hallways, clapping for us and cheering for us and wanting to shake our hands and buy us lunch or whatever. I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I'd walk through an airport on R&R in civilian clothes with just my assault pack on, and there'd be flags and people lined and cards being handed to you with gift cards in them for no apparent reason other than they wanted to support you. And on my way back one time, I sat with a Vietnam veteran, approached me in the airport, thanked me for my service. We had a lengthy conversation, talking about, this would have been one of my Iraq deployments. And he said something that really threw me off, and it really tripped me out. He's like, I'm so glad it's you fighting that fight, because I don't want to fight that fight. That fight is a way too harder of a fight. I would take my fight any day over the fight that you're fighting. And his big concern was the IED threats at the time, VBIDs and all of that. The EFPs were really ramping up and coming on the scene and being super destructive. And I'm just sitting there as an infantry guy, and I'm thinking, like, you're fucking out of your mind. I'd much rather fight my war than fighting your war in the jungles and all of this. So there's that dichotomy. And I'm just curious, did any of them ever give you kind of their perspective on the global war on terror and how we were fighting that war, and kind of compare and contrast to their own war? Or did it never even come up? It was never on their radar?
We talked about it some with some of the veterans. I think that, first off, thank the veteran. I mean, what you experienced, what they didn't experience. And there's a great scene in Swift Sword where Craig Sullivan, Sergeant Sullivan, comes home after all this incredible combat, and he's surrounded by these, he called them hippies, that want to beat him up. And it's just after having tomatoes thrown at him, and he had a gift for his daughter ripped up at security. It was wrapped up for his daughter, a doll. And it was just torn, and you could feel the animosity that he felt. The main lesson, though, that what they indicated, and it's this whole idea of nation building. If you go in, have a clear plan, and win it, and execute it, and win it, whatever it is, what's your plan, and do it and win. And they all expressed a pessimism about, quote, nation building, about what that can accomplish, because when we went into Vietnam, we didn't know. I mean, it was like communism versus freedom. Well, no, that wasn't the case. This was a country looking for independence from what they viewed as imperialism. And even in the Quezon Valley on Operation Swift, you had a lot of men, Vietnamese, that were either in the VC or the NBA. So the Marines didn't have any friends because there was not an understanding of your enemy. And that is one of the key lessons from, I think, The Art of War. Know your enemy. Know them. Know what's making them tick, what's going on, and then base your plan off of knowing the enemy and what you can accomplish and what you cannot accomplish. So in many ways, the Vietnam veteran went into that war already lost, because the objectives, the overarching strategy was faulty and based on too simple assumptions. I mean, meaning they simplified it, and that was a huge mistake. So know your enemy would be, and then base your plan off of that and achieve victory based on what you've learned and known.
This is so fascinating, because history seems to repeat itself, because we didn't learn fucking shit from Vietnam, because we did the same thing, particularly in Afghanistan. The rule number one, know thy enemy, right? Like, we didn't have a fucking clue. We didn't pay attention to any of the history lessons with the Russians. We didn't pay attention to any of the history lessons, going all the way back to Alexander the Great with Afghanistan. And, oh, by the way, look at Afghanistan now. They have billions of dollars worth of our equipment that we just fucking left there. Right. So I think to to just really stress the importance of what you're doing, and focusing on telling stories of a generation of a war. Let's be honest. I mean, it's the same war that I fought in, right? It's a political war. It was. I think I don't know a lot about the Vietnam War. I was born in the 80s, so naturally Vietnam wasn't on my radar. Self-admittedly, I wasn't interested in US history when I was coming up in school. I was more interested in ancient history. Nothing wrong with that, I guess, because there's a lot of history you could study out there. But for me, it's very much GWOT, and particularly with everything that's coming out about global war on terror now, and all the shitty fucking politicians and KBR and Bush and all that shit being tied to them. That's their holding companies. They funded this war, all of that. It's the same damn thing. Vietnam was used to line politicians' pockets, just like global war on terror has been used to line politicians' pockets, just like fucking Ukraine right now, and probably in some way, shape, or form, the shit that's going on with Israel and Iran and Hezbollah and everything, like all of it it's the war machine. And, I'm just really curious, like, how did an entire era, and you mentioned it earlier, Korea and Vietnam, how did these voices get silenced? I mean, I think the most little known war is the Korean War. Like, has anybody familiar with the Chosin Reservoir and what those guys went through? Holy shit.
Oh yeah. Or the Hook, where I mentioned George O'Brien with that Texas Medal of Honor. He was Korea at the Hook. He was fighting Chinese communist troops. He wasn't fighting North Vietnamese, or I'm sorry, North Koreans. He was fighting the Chinese.
Right.
And veteran guys, to answer your question, the Ken Burns documentary on the Vietnam War is very hard to watch. You do have to watch political viewpoints and try to assess things factually. But it's a great lesson on mistake, compounding upon mistake, compounding upon mistake. There was I think the Secretary of Defense McNamara wrote a report way back in the 60s saying we ain't going to win this. And that was put secret, covered up, and they just continued on for whatever reason. Follow the money, as you are already indicated, who's making money off of these contracts, that sort of thing. That always jades perspectives and creates issues. So, but to answer your question about the voices being silenced, I don't know if it's the voices being silenced other than people just simply not knowing. I think in our schools today, we gloss over a lot of this and put it in a different light, but people simply don't know. So whose responsibility then is it to get the word out? Well, it's people like you and me who have an interest, that know, that think that what's going on, who are curious. And then the issue is get the word out, get the book out, get it to many people as possible so people will know. So that's kind of my viewpoint on it. World War II, we still really honor that as we should, because we saved the world, the Western powers. We saved the world from dictatorship and totalitarianism. So, I mean, pivotal. We should do that, but everything is kind of spawned from World War II now, and honor guys like you in this new political war situation caused by nuclear missiles pointed at everybody. We can't go fight a war like World War II anymore. Because somebody said, okay, Hitler, if he had the missiles, would just nuke us.
Yeah.
He didn't have them. He almost had them, but he didn't. So wars are different, but then in many, many ways, from what I've learned, they're very much the same still. And I'll give you one anecdote. I don't want to talk too long. But
you're good, man. No, please. That's what we're here for.
When I wrote Lions of Medina, which was boot camp through Operation Medina. And then I wanted to do one more. So I contacted retired Lieutenant Colonel J.D. Murray, who was the company commander of Mike 35 on Operation Swift as a lieutenant, not a captain, as a lieutenant. The reason being, there were no captains available with combat experience. He was one of the few guys that had any combat experience. And thank God he did, because that combat experience saved the company. But when I first contacted him, told him what I wanted to do, he said, your book needs to be like Eugene Sledge's With the Old Breed. With the Old Breed is probably the best memoir of real fighting in World War II in the Pacific theater. Mm-hmm. It's ugly. It's very hard to read. It's gory. It does not glorify war. It's real. So Sledge would write down anecdotes, put him in his tunic. He was a veteran. He was there at Peleliu, Tarawa, and Okinawa. The HBO miniseries, The Pacific, is based in part on Sledge's memoir. So if you, Adam, want to go dive into World War II history immediately and American history, get that book, With the Old Breed, because it's real.
I did a lot of I was fascinated by World War II. My senior history paper was about the Battle of Stalingrad. The millions of people lost. And then one of my favorite books sounds like the book that you just described, is The Battling Bastards of Bataan, about the Pacific Theater.
Yes.
And if you've read it, it sounds a lot like what you described about Eugene's book. It's hard to read. It's gory. It's real. It's real fucking combat about what these men went through in Bataan and the Pacific Theater. So I do have my grandfather was a World War II medic, and you can't see it because it's blurred out, but that's not my Purple Heart in the case. That's my grandfather's Purple Heart. Wow. Unfortunately, the Army didn't see fit, after being blown up a bunch of times, because they didn't know what they didn't know, to give me one. I've got just about every other award you could fucking want, but none of that shit matters to me, anyway. So yeah, I did have some more. I've been fascinated with I guess war in general. Like I said, all the battles from ancient Egypt, all that stuff, all that fighting. The Crusades is just one of the most fascinating things to me. The 100 Years' War, the 80 Years' War, all that good stuff. Like, all that stuff has always fascinated me. And what really fascinates me about all of that is that's a different type of combat, man. Like, that's up close and personal. A lot of like what World War II was, like, not a lot of long range rifle stuff going on. Like, you're in trench warfare, like, using fixed bayonets, and like, we're gonna cross this little pile of land here, and whoever's a bigger man's gonna fucking win. Like, that's kind of how it goes. And thinking back to my time in war, it's like, man, we'd be driving 60 miles an hour down the damn MSR, and the next thing you know, your fucking vehicle's on its side in fucking pieces, and you're like, what the hell happened, right? Like, that's how war has evolved,
right?
And so, dude, there's so many places we could go with this, and I love just that you figured out storytelling and how to tell these stories. And so I kind of want to get kind of your perspective on, like, when you sat down to tell these stories about, this war, how did you like put that together? Like, for me, with this podcast, for example, I started all of this kind of with the idea, the path back to purpose for veterans after we get out was through entrepreneurship. Now, obviously, over doing 100 of these episodes and having conversations with veterans, you learn and you get feedback, and it turned into, how do I help veterans not make the same mistakes I made in the transition? And I think that's just through having conversations and having conversations with people like yourself who may not have served, but have all of these insights because you chose to go support something or call to light something that doesn't have a lot of light shined on it. But then at the same time, like bringing veterans on and having them talk about their transition experiences, giving a little, a segment of, my show is usually separated into 3 segments, and staying on topic here about how I tell veteran stories is, like I said, first question, where did you grow up and what inspired you to join? That's to build like the highlight reel of their career of, like, who is this person that I'm talking to, lend some credibility to their experience, and then move into their transition and all of the kind of the pitfalls that they run into in their transition. And then on the other side of that transition, and this third segment used to be more about like, you're building a business or whatever, but it doesn't have to be about that. It's like, what are you doing living a life that fulfills you now, in spite of all of the shit that you went through from, military career to now. So I'm just curious, like, what is your process for telling these men's stories from Vietnam, and particularly, how did you end up with the Marines? It sounds like the Marines for both books, right?
Marines for both books, right?
I'm really fascinated about this whole process. I've been challenged this year to write a book about the transition from my perspective, telling my transition story. And so I've started that. I've got the first 10,000 words down, but I've kind of run out of energy, because it's just like, for me, it's like, I'm not a writer. I never really wanted to be a writer, but also like, it's important to tell my story because I've seen the power of storytelling just in what I've built here. So I think selfishly, I want to know your process so that maybe I can put that process to use in the future work that I do to kind of move all of this forward to help more veterans.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I'm inspired by what you're doing. So first thing that I would say is we can never, people say storytelling. Okay. Well, it sounds kind of light when you say it that way.
It does. It really does, doesn't it?
But it's not. Our whole culture is based on stories, conversations, what happened, how did someone handle that? Even in our quote pop culture, everything's a story. Everything is a story. If you want to use that word, it's not a bedtime story. It embeds our culture in it and how we are as men and women. So first off, I will never underemphasize the importance to our culture and to our people of telling our stories and learning from those. So that's number one. The process, as far as the Marines, I don't even know how that happened. Just that first veteran I contacted was a Marine, and both books are about the Marine Corps, basically because one Marine said, if you think Medina was a tough battle, how about Operation Swift? Contact this guy. And, it was another Marine. So soldiers, Marines, it does matter with a different ethos a little bit, but really not. It's still the warrior ethos when you get down to it. So the first thing I would call the process, it was like trying to build a three-dimensional puzzle and you don't have any pieces. So the first step is to go find those pieces, and then which pieces fit the puzzle you're trying to build and which ones don't, because you can't tell every bit of everything that someone tells you. It doesn't fit into what you're trying to do. And it took a lot of time. It took a lot of conversation. It started with the officers and the NCO veterans who I gained their trust. Then they would say, okay, you need to talk to, my squad leader here. And it was a building process of learning, getting a thumbnail sketch of what happened, and then just kind of building it up on an armature from there. And it took a lot of time. It took a whole lot of years to do it. I'm probably not going to do another book like these two because I have limited time myself. I mean, you never say never. I don't know at this point.
Well, particularly, I was just going to say, like, AI can make a lot of this a lot easier now, right? You can take your audio recordings of interviews, you can have those automatically transcribed by AI. You can get insights out of it. You can build outlines and stuff like that based off the information to really shortcut your time in writing these things. And so I really hope that you kind of lean into that never say never. And I hope that you maybe reconsider taking on projects like this, because I think what you're doing is super important. Particularly, I used to pride myself on not reading a lot of nonfiction, and particularly I would read a lot of Global War on Terror, kind of self-published stories. Particularly one that stands out is Ryan Conklin wrote a book called An Angel from Hell. And Ryan Conklin was deployed to the same place I was deployed to on my first deployment. And that was really eye-opening to me to listen to another or read another soldier's story about the same place that I was currently fighting in. And it was really, really cool to do that. And then I probably read the vast majority of the Global War on Terror books that have been written out there, because I can relate to that stuff so much. And it's awesome that we have this ability to now tell our stories because of technology and all of that, and it's accessible to literally everybody now, right? Like I'm sitting here telling you that I'm going to write a book about the transition because I was challenged to do that. It's hard for me. I know growth comes on the other side of challenge, and I'm sure I'll learn a lot about myself and about my journey through doing that. But would you encourage folks like me to write about our stories so that somebody like you doesn't have to do this 30 years in the future as we're all starting to die off and kind of try and get the stuff right? You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. I think, yeah. Well, you are the Eugene Sledge of your generation, because you saw combat, you saw the experience. I didn't, and I'll give you just an anecdote. Swift Sword is a second edition. I wrote the first edition. I had a lot of tragedy in my own life, and I was married, and my wife had terminal breast cancer, small kids at home. So I was focused on really taking care of her and the kids, and not giving. I finished the first edition, but not even really knowing that it was not finished. I went back to it in 2023, took a look at it, and I said, this is incomplete. You were preoccupied with your own internal wars and tragedies. Now you're in a different spot. What's missing? The epiphany was that I was telling their story. They need to tell their story. I had all of the interviews in the cloud on my email, even the guys that had passed away. And I said, what's missing is them telling the story. So I went back, and if you look at Swift Sword, you'll see quotes from the veterans in italics. Those are their exact words, placed into the structure that I had already completed. And it made the story, it made it real, because now it's them telling their story, not me. And that's the key. So from your standpoint, your viewpoint, you need to tell your story, and you need to get your comrades who you fought with to tell their story. And even if it's a video interview, like we saw before Band of Brothers, those guys speaking, just to get that story recorded and preserved is step number one. Because if you don't tell your story and you pass from this earth, we don't have the benefit of it. And if you, at the very least, record it and set out to record your brothers in arms and what they experienced, maybe even write a book later. First step, I've got it, I've preserved it. And I can say that if I had not preserved those interviews that I had of those guys, I would not have been able to finish the book, because half of those guys had died. So I couldn't go back and talk to them, but I had it. So preserving the stories is first and foremost the number one thing. Then you can think, well, if this is a book, what would that look like? Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely, man. It really does help. And I think the key, what you were talking about, is telling the story in their words, not and I'm not saying that you did this, so please don't take this the wrong way, but one of my favorite books or stories, or however you want to look at it, Lone Survivor by Marcus Luttrell. I read that book probably, and this is not an exaggeration, I read this on one of my deployments. Forgive me because I don't remember, because I just did so many and read so many books, but I literally read that book like 4 times back to back to back. I love that book so much. It's an incredible story of resilience and just belief in oneself and just never quitting, and like the epitome of what I think a Navy SEAL is. And mind you, I'm just a regular, just leg infantry guy from the Army. I didn't do any kind of special operations or whatever. That's not how my career played out. But when I watched the movie when it came out, I was really disappointed because they fucking Hollywoodized it and they fuck up the entire ending and they don't do his story any justice. And I fucking hate that shit. It really pisses me off. And that's what I love about a lot of the books that you're reading from the Global War on Terror. They're written by individuals like me. It's their story and their words as they remember it. And I really enjoy that because I think you probably learned this lesson. I guess I need to ask this question first. With either of these two books, did any of the men that you interviewed and wrote these books about get a chance to read the books?
Oh, sure. Oh, sure. Yeah. In fact, the first book, Lions of Medina, I basically almost co-wrote it with Jack Ruffer, who has since passed away, but he was a platoon commander on Operation Medina. And the reason for that was to get it right. And even with Swift Sword now, going back, even with the second edition, I'm going to go back and make some changes to it when the current inventory sells, based on what one of my veterans who I stay in contact with said. This isn't exactly the way this was. You need to kind of tweak this. And I'm on it. We need to wait. Thanks for letting me know. You try to do your due diligence to get it out to people to review, but in something like this, it's a continual process in a lot of ways. So I'll go back and make those changes. And to your point, my new book that'll be coming out hopefully this year is historical fiction. So that's me putting my spin, Hollywood, on facts, on a factual situation. But at the beginning, I say, that's what this is. This has got fact in it. It's got fiction in it. I even do an addendum in the back that what's fact and what's fiction. What have I made up? What is real fact? So people know. So I'm trying to say, don't quote this particular book that's coming out as any sort of historical resource, because it's not. It's written like a novel based on true facts, but there's a lot of fiction in here because I'm writing. I'm a writer, and this purpose of this book is not the same as Swift Sword here, which is nonfiction. With regard to the movie, what you were talking about, unfortunately, we talked about Landman earlier. Hollywood's going to be Hollywood to sell tickets.
Yeah.
And I just think that see the movie and okay, it is what it is. I know differently. I'm glad that I know. And there's just not much you can do about it after that.
Yeah, I love the direction you're going with the what did you call that? Historical fiction or whatever. Like it's some of my favorite authors, Mark Greaney, Jack Carr. They write in the military thriller category. They do that a lot. They use fact, but also in novel format, and it's so much fun to read because I relate to it because they're talking about technology that exists, technology I may or may not have used, right? That kind of stuff. Like it really makes for an interesting story. And I'm so glad that the guys that are a part of these books that you wrote about got a chance to read it, because I think you probably noticed through that process, you probably freed them from the ghosts of those experiences. It's been my experience that telling these stories, and mind you, I am not a veteran that tells my combat stories. I will never be a veteran that tells my combat stories. It's just not what I think I need to be doing. Those are mine, and I get to hold on to those. Those are for me to share with my brothers that I was there with. And we often don't talk about those. We it's really funny for me. Most of our trips down memory lane involve training, like non-eventful, really shitty times at Fort Polk, Louisiana, or Fort Irwin, California, just getting ready for training, or getting ready for the deployments on the training cycle. Those are where most of our stories come from. The combat stories, a lot of us, at least in my experience and with my buddies, we don't talk about those. We just kind of whatever. And like I said, I've got the first 10,000 words of my book written, and in my transition, it's been so cathartic for me to go back, walk down memory lane, write those ideas down on paper. Did you notice that through the process with these Vietnam veterans?
Oh, absolutely. I think that if I had approached these same guys maybe a decade or 15 years earlier, I would not have had the success I had with them opening up. So I think I would have been put off a lot more because it was just too close. It was also a time of life. When I interviewed these guys, they were in their 60s, maybe late 60s. Now they're in their mid 70s if they're around. And at that point in their lives, I think that, and a lot of the guys still would not speak with me because of PTSD. Their memories is just too difficult. And of course, I certainly respect that 100%. But from the guys that I did speak with, they were like, okay, I'm in the fourth quarter of my life. I want to tell the stories about those young guys that I knew so long ago that didn't come back, and honor them, because you'll just have a picture. If you get on any, like a Vietnam wall on the internet, sometimes there's just a photo. That's all you have. And I got just recently, there was a young man by the last name of Martin who was killed on the first day of Swift. His brother posted a review on Amazon saying, "I never knew how my brother died until I read this book. Thank you. I never knew what happened to him." And this is how many years later? What are we, 50 years later, something like that? So I think, to answer your question, I think it was a time of life for these guys, them saying they want to honor those young men they knew from so long ago, knowing that being in their own fourth quarter, their stories are going to die with them. And it was a thought for their kids and grandkids and just future generations to, at least if they had an interest, had that story and that knowledge preserved.
Yeah.
And I guess what we're looking at is, okay, at least it's preserved for somebody to go read about.
Yeah.
And learn.
I love this, man. I love this so much. What have these creative pursuits taught you about purpose and importance of remembering these stories from our warfighters throughout history? And how do you think these are going to help moving forward into the future with our future, military members?
That's a great question. First off, and I'll answer that first about what it's meant to me personally, my own struggles in the life of peace and affluence. I mean, I'm in my office with air conditioning, but we all face challenges and tragedies. I mentioned my wife who passed away from leaving a 6-year-old daughter at home. So I'm inspired by whatever happens in my life. My inspiration will be, well, if those guys at age 18 and 20 and 21 could do what they did, I can certainly do what is challenging me. So in my own personal civilian life is a great inspiration. Like, you know what, I'll read about that. And I remember even to another time watching Saving Private Ryan and that beach, and when they're Omaha beach scene, I'm like, all right, if those guys can do that, I can do whatever comes across my way. So I would say and I've had a lot of friends who have had a nephew or a son going into the Marine Corps or the Army, get a copy of the book for them. It's certainly not only for those young men and women that are going in to serve. I think it will give a great perspective and encouragement reading something tough. But I think, and for a lot of men in general, I have a 27-year-old son. It can be tough to be a guy in today's culture. And these stories can, like, look what these guys did. If they did that, you can do whatever, and you can step up and try to, be like these guys. I never like when people say, "Oh, you're a veteran. Oh, are you okay? I'm so sorry." Adam,
Right.
Adam, man, it must be tough being you, and I'm so sorry. I hope you're getting all the help you need. Well, what is that? No, I'm saying we all need resources and help. I need them all, but it's a victimization mentality. And I'm like, no, no, Adam, man, you're a hero. You went and did your duty and you're strong, whatever you've got that you coming back with. Let's, if you've got anything like that, we all need help. Everybody does. But you see my kind of the attitude, and it's like, no, these guys are strong. And
I'm glad you're bringing this up because I've got feelings about this, right? Like, the thing is the thank you for your service stuff. And I will be the first to tell you, 90% of us are very uncomfortable when you walk up to us and thank us for our service. And let me tell you why, because at 17 years old, I volunteered. Remember, we're an all volunteer army. The last time we had a not all volunteer army was the time period that you've been writing about. So it's much different in my mind. And this is just me. I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for everybody else, though I think a lot of people will probably relate to what I'm saying. And so the thank you for my service is always weird. What am I supposed to say to you? What are you expecting me to say to you when I come back and you're thanking me for my service? Because in my mind, it's I volunteered the first time and then I volunteered again. And then, oh, by the way, I volunteered again. And then I would volunteer a third time before my career would end, right? So I knew what I was signing up for. I kept signing up for it. Nobody forced my hand. Nobody told me I had to do this. For me, it was my way out of small town Indiana, right? Like that's what it was. It was my way of getting out and knowing that the world's a larger place and that I could see the world. And so, the thank you for your service stuff or the taking pity on me, it's like, if anybody needs to take pity on me, it's myself, because I put myself in this situation. I am the cause of all of this because I volunteered to go do this. And yeah, I've got my own fucking issues, just like all of us do. And, yes, the resources could be better, but ultimately it's not your burden to bear. Like, you didn't do this to me. I did this to myself. And so the best thing I've been able to come up with for a response to thank you for your service is thank you for being worth serving. And I feel like that's about as polite as I can be, because
I love that.
It really does annoy. And I can't take credit for that. I got to give the credit. Forgive me, I can't remember his name, but another veteran on LinkedIn and I had this conversation in the comments. And I told him I was going to use that. So shout out to you. I know if you're listening to this, you remember that conversation. But to me, that made the most sense because, I volunteered to do this. You didn't ask me to serve you, right? So why are you thanking me to serve you? And so ultimately, just coming back around, it's not rude. Thank you for being worth serving, because, this country's great. You're a part of this country, and we can all do great things together. And
yeah, I love that.
Leave it at that. So I appreciate that you brought that up, because there is a lot of that, you know what I mean? And I think that there's some more stuff that goes into that in like the work that I do with the transition and getting veterans to realize, like, you're not entitled to shit when you get out, period. And nobody owes you anything, because this was an all volunteer thing. And so whether that looks like you going into corporate America or starting a business, like, you're gonna have to start back from the bottom. The only difference is you've got high leverage skills. They're going to shorten your timeline of how long you have to stay at the bottom and pay those dues. So when civilians are coming up to us and taking that pity on us and looking at us as victims, it's creating the entitlement mentality that we're seeing in the veteran community. And we need to stop that. We need to stop that, because it's not doing us any favors. And, it's honestly costing you more money as a taxpayer, because our mental health declines and we think we're owed all of this shit. And then we don't do anything great with our lives. And that's what I'm here to try and change, because it doesn't have to be that.
Yeah, I love that. And I love your perspective. Once again, I'm not a veteran, so I don't have that perspective, but hearing it from you, I think it's very healthy. I think it's very strong. I love the circular thank you for being worth serving. And then that comes around to me, someone like me, to point out what you guys did so that I can sit here once again in my comfortable office, drink my coffee, speak with freedom. And
Oh no, what happened?
when someone thanks you for your service, and are we back? Oh man,
Yeah,
not
we're
again.
back. No, you're good,
Yeah,
brother.
okay, good. It's glitching on my end. So if it's good on your end, then we're okay.
Yes, sir. We're good.
and your response to him, thank you for being worth serving. And
Yeah.
and then that comes to my responsibility, our responsibility on the other end of this. And that is to tell your stories, honor your stories. And our Vietnam generation, because of their age, being in mid 70s, we're losing them, just like we did with our greatest generation. Thank them. Thank your grandfather, your uncle. You see someone with the hat, because they didn't get they really didn't the thanks that they deserved. It was really, really a bad situation of how these guys were treated. So that's where I would come down. Vietnam, because of the time of life we're in now. Thank them, honor them, tell their story, get that into our cultural process. I think even today with veterans, it's still a situation of you over there, or yeah, what was that? I'm reading about Taylor Swift right now.
Yeah.
We're so we're so preoccupied with other quote heroes, be it a celebrity or we're jacked up with our perspective and what occupies our attention. So by bringing this into the dialogue, and that's why I really, really applaud your podcasts. And I've been on a number of podcasts, and I applaud all of you guys and women too that I've been on with, to tell this story, to get it into our dialogue, to bring it in, and with our perspective. I mean, with our ability with the internet now, and we do have some abilities we didn't have in the past to do that. So
Yeah.
I want to thank you and applaud you for what you're doing, and because it takes all of us to make it work. And if we can inspire just one young person or even an older person, it doesn't matter. I think that we've done our job, and we need to realize how important that is. So I want to thank you.
Well, brother, selfishly, man, this is actually for me. It's not really, it's so cathartic for me. And I think the one thing it's taught me is, you know, healing happens through conversation, man. And at some point, we've gotten away from that. We have retreated into our digital worlds and our phones and our tablets and our computers. And, I mean, so many different things go along with that. The advent of the keyboard tough guy, and people forgetting what it feels like to be punched in the mouth, and just genuine disconnect from our fellow human. And, by getting to sit down and have these conversations with you, and I don't even know if our conversation makes sense today, man. I just know that I enjoyed it. I got a lot out of it. And if I did, then somebody else will. And it gets to live on the internet forever for people to find it and pull what they will out of this and use it however they need to use it to be better at life. And I think that's the whole point about telling our stories, and what you do and what I'm doing. And I'm just so grateful that there are people like you out there that want to help us tell our stories, because for whatever reason you didn't serve, but it did affect you and you think it's important. And so, the honor is mine to host you, and to thank you for what you're doing. And with that, I'd love for you to tell everybody how they can get in contact with you. I assume that you're more than willing to help them tell their stories, give them pointers if they do want to, feel inspired to tell their story. Tell them how they can get in touch with you, where they can buy your books, all that good stuff, brother.
Absolutely. So first off, website, Doyle Glass, DoyleGlass.com. You go there, you can, I need to double check, but I think pretty sure you can purchase the book directly from my website. If not, go to Amazon and Barnes and Noble. Go on those websites. It's available in ebook, paperback, and audio. So that's number one. Social media, Facebook, Instagram, Doyle Glass author. And what we try to do with, I've got people that help me, my team, is we post stories about just unsung heroes on a blog. I mean, and if you join Doyle Glass author on Facebook, you'll get in your feed a story of an unsung hero. It could be a 12-year-old kid. It could be an elderly woman in Malaysia or wherever that's doing something to better the world around them. Heroic, self-sacrifice to help others, positive stories. So those would be the places to find me. Send me an email, get on my subscriber list. You can join that on doyleglass.com. And I would love to connect with all of you. It would be great.
Awesome, man. Doyle, I appreciate your time. I thank you for being here. I thank you for the work that you're doing and the books that you're writing. And I really just appreciate you taking the time to do this and reaching out and wanting to give your wisdom to a community that I know is going to benefit from it. That said, ladies and gentlemen, please help me achieve my goal of getting this podcast in front of 1 million veterans before I turn 40 on May 9th, 2025. Lofty goal. I literally say this at the end of every episode. This is like the only self-promotion I do. You should know this by now, but there's 19 million veterans in the United States. If you all that listen to this currently just take 2 seconds to share it, we'll blow that goal out of the water. It's really not that lofty of a goal when you think about it like that. And until next week, we will see you. Well, I guess it really won't be next week since we're releasing 3 episodes a week this year. So until next time, we'll be back with another banger of an episode with, who knows what the podcast world's going to bring us for guests. Take care, everybody. Thanks for listening. And please help me achieve this goal. Take care.